This is Financial Standard, the definitive source of news, thought leadership and analysis for Australian wealth management professionals. Financial Standard. Take the lead.
Hi, welcome to the Financial Standard podcast. My name is Matthew Y, and I'm a journalist at the Financial Standard team. Today we have Ben Nash, financial advisor and founder of Pivot Wealth, in the studio with us today. He brings close to 20 years experience in financial planning and is a member of the FS Power 50. Thanks for being with us, Ben.
Good to be chatting. You're making me feel old. It's been almost 20 years, but time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So many of our listeners may have heard or seen you on the news or internet as you have built quite a well-established personality on those platforms, which we'll get into in a moment. But first, can you please go through how have you go about becoming a financial advisor?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I actually sort of fell into financial advice. I didn't really know that it existed as a job. And actually, my grandma gave me a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which I'm sure, a lot of listeners would be familiar with. And yeah, it sparked an interest and I started reading, and then I started reading more and more. And this is after high school. I sort of worked for a couple of years. Yeah, came across this, sort of fell in love with finance, and then decided that I wanted to pursue that as a career. And so went back to uni, studied finance, and then got a grad job and sort of followed the path into the industry. Worked a couple of different jobs, and then started my business in 2015.
What do you think is the core component that motivated you to, begin Pivot Wealth?
Well, look, I know a lot of people that love being entrepreneurs, and they're very much about that. For me, it actually wasn't that, but I do love being a business owner and the stuff that I've been able to do through entrepreneurship. But when I started the business, I really, probably a bit naive, probably a little bit arrogant, that I joined a company to build their financial advice offering. And so thankfully I had some really great mentors that helped me quite a lot in doing that. And then as that business grew and I was going to become a partner in that business, there were a few things that I wanted to do differently, which I didn't have the control to do, not being the owner of the business. And yeah, I suppose that sort of got me to thinking about, what I would do if I could do it on my own. And yeah, and then, one thing led to another and I ended up starting the company. But it wasn't really to start a business. It was just to do a few things differently. And also because I didn't want to have a boss, basically.
So I want to talk about, you've obviously, as mentioned earlier, you've established a pretty well-known personality over the news and media. How do you think these sort of being a voice for the industry has positioned where you are today?
Well, look, when I started my business, I think a lot of the traditional path in financial advice is to find some referral partners and gets like an accountant, mortgage broker, or these sorts of professionals referring in. But when I started my business, I started from scratch. I didn't acquire a business, and we've grown organically for the whole sort of journey. But that made me feel a bit nervous, the idea of relying on someone else to be able to, grow my business, pay my rent. And so I figured that content was a way that I could build my own audience and therefore build my own demand. And so that was essentially the start of the journey. I started doing a bit of writing, probably pretty bad writing, had some content that people could download, and that allowed me to build a small list. Then we started doing live events, and for a long time, that was the core of what I had done. Up until COVID, when I was working the rooms, but then the rooms all sort of closed and live events were just not an option anymore. And so we pivoted, so to speak, and moved more into the digital content space. Before that, I hadn't really done much from video, had never done a podcast, never done a webinar. But like a lot of people at that time, that the world sort of seized up a bit, and I was pretty concerned. It was a pretty small team at that time, but it still had a team. And, I felt as the owner of the business, I felt like responsibility to look after those people. And so that's when we really sort of went into overdrive from a content perspective. And it's really just built on things from there. I feel really fortunate to have had a lot of opportunities, but really in the early days, it was just saying yes to absolutely everything. And what I found is that over the years, one thing leads to a slightly bigger thing, or a slightly an opportunity that gives you a little bit more exposure. And as you build up that momentum, I suppose in that space, it opens doors for new opportunities, but allows you to be a little bit more selective as well. And I really enjoy the content. I think it's great. I think it's great to be able to influence people. It's also a great way to grow your business. It's not an easy way to grow your business, but yeah, I think it's good. And as a business has grown, and you invest back into the growth, and you almost build like a dependency on that as well. And so I often get the question from other advisors and say, how do you do that? And I say, well, just put yourself in a position where it would be very bad if you didn't do it, and then you sort of do it. So I appreciate that's not necessarily the right approach for everyone, but that's worked for me.
Ever since the pandemic, we've obviously seen a lot of macro events unfolded. I'm not trying to get into the bottom of them, but I want to see how have these sort of events contributed to how you change yourself and your business.
Well, I think The Barefoot Investor, the book by Scott Pape's obviously been very pervasive in Australia, and I think that really got a lot of people more aware of their money before and what was possible. And I think Scott Pape has done a phenomenal job in opening up people's awareness. And so, look, I think there's a real desire out there for people to understand money better. I think we've all seen the stats, and I'm sure the audience would be pretty familiar with how low our levels of financial literacy are overall, and then also how big some of the financial challenges are across the Australian sort of advice consumer, or just Australian population more broadly as well. And so it's almost like a bit of a perfect storm, really, where people are thirsting for knowledge. We've got advisor numbers declining at the same time, and so I think there's a real need for that. And then every advice business is different, and every advisor has a different approach and different set of experiences that have shaped their own philosophies. And so I think most people have a story to tell, and there's a group of people out there that would love to hear their story told in that way, or their viewpoint told in a certain way. And so I think that when you be who you are and you stick to that voice, I think it allows you to build a little tribe. And if you keep doing it and you're consistent with what you do, and you focus on it, and you try to improve what you're doing, then that allows it to build and grow. But I think, to go back to your question, definitely there's been a lot of interest that's been spurred by COVID. That was when I noticed that period in particular was where our content really took off. We saw a lot more finance content going onto social media. There really wasn't very much of that. I don't think much before 2020, definitely some, but I don't think it was as common as what it was today. I don't think they had finfluencers back then, or maybe they did, but they weren't called that. And so, yeah, I think we've seen it really build over that period. And then there's been plenty of things to talk about, and the pandemic, what's going on in America, what's happening geopolitically, what's happening in the finance markets around the world. And so people want the knowledge, their sense is heightened. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of interest out there. And I think it's all of those ingredients lead to the ability to cultivate communities and to really get traction in that.
I think, as an advisor, you probably heard numerous stories, from your clients, and each of them have different backgrounds, came with different stories. And what I want to ask is that how do you navigate your clients through challenging periods, because you have to understand their personal stories, and it sounds like a lot to take in doing it all by yourself.
Look, I think we've got an incredible team now that they play a huge role as the sort of the tip of the spear in terms of a lot of those client conversations. But I think that when you truly educate your client base, I think that goes a really long way, because in the absence of education, then you're sort of like you're having to persuade or negotiate or explain every time something happens in the world, and people are naturally concerned. It's their money, they work hard for it, they build it up. But when people can build their understanding over time, and that's something that we focus on a lot, like we do it a lot with external facing content, but for all of our clients, we've got internal tools, libraries of resources, things that our advisors can draw on. And what we find is that over time, our clients will build up their level of financial understanding. And so that means when those major things happen, that it's easier for us to navigate that with clients because they already have that understanding. They know that we're playing the long game. They know that we need to focus on their goals. They know that we're only investing money that can be there to ride out those periods of volatility or uncertainty or whatever. And if we stick to the right strategies, we've got all of that stuff locked down, and they know that the investments they're confident in with a medium and long-term view, then that goes a really long way, I think, to avoiding those reactive decisions that can be really value destroying when it comes to your wealth and investments.
And you're obviously part of the FS Power 50, and I just want to ask, how does this accolade? What does it mean to you?
Look, I love the Power 50. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I think it's great to see that list and the amazing advisors that are on there that are being recognized for the work that they're doing in the industry. I think I've been there, 9 years or something, and it's been great to see it. The composition of the list really changed quite a lot over that period of time as well. We've seen, a lot of really incredible advisors that put in a lot of work, I think, to really change, educate people, change perception of advice. And I think for a long time, we all know as advisors all of the brilliant work that gets done by advisors every single day, but I think that wasn't always the public perception. And I think for me, I think that these are the voices that are really, really changing that and have changed that over the last decade and a bit. I love being a part of it.
So with all the work stuff out the way, this my favorite part of the podcast is to ask you, what do you like to do in your free time? Because we know financial advisors don't really have a lot of them. So run me through what you do on your weekend.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 young kids, my 2 daughters, 5 and 6, and so they're pretty consuming from a time perspective. But yeah, it's a great age typically just doing things with them, sports or activities, running around trying to get some downtime in. I actually love marketing. Someone asked me the other day what my hobbies are, and I said marketing, and it's kind of is. I enjoy seeing what people are doing in that space as well, and so it's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine in looking at trends and things that are going on there, and across the economy and financial markets as well. But maybe I'm a little bit boring. Maybe it is a consequence of the fact that you don't get a lot of spare time between trying to run a business and be a dad and all those sorts of things as well.
A lot of advisors spend time with their family, and I think it's lovely that you're able to do the same as well. So those are all the questions I have for you today, and thank you so much for your time.
Good to chat, man.
Thanks for listening to this Financial Standard podcast. For more information, visit financialstandard.com.au. Please keep in mind that the information discussed in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider personal circumstances. Reliance should not be placed on any content without further independent financial research and advice.